About the depiction of Josh as someone who's mentally ill, but whose life is not endless suffering. And in fact, from time to time, it's his illness that he seeks out. He prefers it. And to my mind, that was part and parcel of someone who had been living with something for decades and understood it better than I think the average person wants to give him credit for. And that doesn't mean that he is able to navigate things smoothly, or that he's able to, that he doesn't lose his grasp on this thing that he's kind of struggled to master. But it seemed to me like the depictions that I had seen that I think were a little more familiar with, of people who have as the not so nice character Don says, these 64-cent conditions, that they're seen as like psychotic with a capital P or capital PS, that they are dangerous, that they're inherently violent or untrustworthy or whatever it is. And I felt like I really wanted a movie where somebody who maybe felt as if that was not a good representation of him or her, the person who's actually living with that condition, could come and go, oh yeah, look, it's like a nice schizophrenic person like me. Which is maybe a weird thing to think, and it's certainly a weird audience to try to play to, but I felt like it was worth it.
Yeah, I think that the layers were there for me as a performer. I think I saw Emily as a character in that moment thinks that Craig is real, but me as a performer reads the script as a whole and understands that in a small group of people, one person's disorientation or sort of melted view of reality affects everyone else's, and that it bleeds in. And so in the moment when she sees him, I guess what I was interested in is all of those intersecting perspectives, which is like, for Emily, yeah, she just sees a guy and she sees like a hunk from a TV show that she watches. But you zoom out a little bit more and you start to play with the concept of an unreliable narrator. And you start to think about how loneliness really warps us and changes us into a different creature. And then you start to play with the potential of maybe he's not there at all, and maybe she's making it up, or maybe they are somehow siblings in some weird illness, and you let it explode, or you let it fall apart, which also is what, in my own experiences of like mental darkness, has felt like, is like, should I just like let it fall apart? Should I just let it fall apart? Should I just believe in the thing that falls apart? And so I think it's all at once. I think Emily does think that Craig is real, and she knows he is, but she is a bad therapist with a surprising ability to be empathetic. And that in the moment when Josh says to her, like, I am my brother, it's almost like the empathy is overwhelming, and everything is firing at once.
Because she's like essentially a reflection of himself, because she is probably a figment of his imagination, even though, we tried to leave that open to the audience. I think that it's easy to empathize with him for her, and he shows a different side of himself to Hannah. Brian and I, in developing the character, talked about sort of what she means to him, and I think that she's like his comfort zone, especially because things are falling apart for him so much. And so I wanted to try to exude that kind of warmth a safe space for him in a moment where he really doesn't feel safe or stable. And and when they go on that walk and when they have their meetings, like I think it's fun for her. I think that, I mean, obviously she's not real necessarily, but she thinks she's real. She feels real to herself. And I think there's like, she has a lot of the same characteristics as him because she comes from his mind. So they relate to each other. Like they have the same kind of weird eccentricities. And then when they have that kind of final scene where he actually reveals, you know, more about his mental illness, it almost felt to me like a moment of being honest with yourself, because, you know, essentially he's talking to himself in that moment. And I think he's really being real with himself and his own sickness. So I remember that day shooting that scene. It just felt so sad just being there and listening to Zach talk about living on the street and being cold, so cold that, you know, he forgot what cold was. And it was easy to empathize as a performer, but also I think even as the character, because he was revealing parts of himself he wasn't quite showing other people in the movie.
Well, I really wanted them, that structure you're describing is specifically what I wanted, in the sense that you had a central relationship that is platonic and stays platonic, that we devote a lot of time to, and then each half of that relationship goes off, and, you know, and they have their lives, and I think specifically for the reason you're pointing out, it's a tricky needle to thread, sort of, because I think we sort of want to know who the main character is. I think that Emily's decisions propel the story more so than Josh's, and I think Emily changes more than Josh does. There's a screenwriting teacher that I had long ago said something really interesting about superheroes. She was like, you know, superheroes don't need character arcs. In that, and it's funny now to think about the success of certain superhero movies versus others. Like the DC ones are like so serious. It's like, you know, just be Superman. It's fine. Like, you don't need to learn something about yourself. Like, you can just pick up buildings and fly around with them. It's okay. Because I think that that's what we want. What we want is to just see the obstacle get greater, but Superman stays Superman. Like, that's the whole point. But then she made this great analogy, or she used another great example of like Carl in the movie Sling Blade, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I kind of saw Josh as more like Carl. Like he's there. And I don't know if any people have seen Sling Blade, but go check it out. It's truly one of the best, like, $100,000 movies anyone's ever made. But he's there to affect other people in a sense. So Josh doesn't necessarily have to change. I think Emily earns the growth a little more. She's the one who's making the mistakes that she's then meant to learn from. So I feel like at the end of the story, well, I think it's very easy to latch on to Josh and go, oh, Josh is the main character. But I think at the end of the story, Josh and Craig have achieved something really important, but the odds of them being right back where they started, you know, very soon thereafter, are probably better than Emily falling into the exact same trap again. Like, I think that she's in a place where she can at least see things a little more clearly, whether she's, you know, like a new person or not. So I think from that sense, you know, from that sense, it's very split, but they're very different lead characters. I hope that we can kind of balance them both.
I mostly just try to do things I've never done before. So I mentioned this in the last Q&A, but at the time I was playing a lot of really like dark, intense, tortured roles, and I was really happy to play like a sweet, warm role. And also this cast really drew me to this project too. It's so cool to be part of an ensemble of people that I really respect, that are my peers. I feel like I've worked with really like seasoned vets, and that's amazing, but there's like something extra special about working with like your peers that you really respect, that kind of validates you in a different way. And also the fact that it was exploring mental health. I feel like we all have mental health issues, if we're being honest with ourselves. It's really hard to be human, and I just like want to talk more about that. So there was a lot of things that drew me into this project. But yeah, when I'm picking parts, I guess it's half about the part and half about the people.
It changes for me, like every year. It feels like I change what I want for myself. But I think when we were making this film, Zach emailed the script to me, and I just had really never been in anything dramatic before. The only movie that had kind of been dramatic that I had been in was the movie Obvious Child, and that was really a comedy with a lot of different emotional points. I wouldn't really call it a drama, and I just wanted to see what I could do. And much like Sheila, like I want to do something that I haven't done before. And I also think that because I do come from comedy, I have this weird thing in me that's like, I don't want to be cheap. There's a lot of comedies that are written for women. After the movie Bridesmaids, which is wonderful, came out, there's just like a lot of like actual imposter garbage that's written for women and takes women down. And like, I just don't want to play some dude's version of a wild, fun woman. It's all like really messed up to me, and like I would rather have no job than be in like Bad Moms, like I really would. And that's maybe why I'm not in like a lot of big movies, because I say no, I won't be in that movie. So I guess I'm looking to be in something that turns my brain on, and where I could either go just full out and feel what that's like, or honestly even fail. But I would just rather be in something that keeps me alive rather than something that makes me feel like I'm just like sucking a chode. That's how I feel. It's late, but that's how I feel. But I don't feel like Brian is making me suck a chode. If that, sorry. Even though he's a middle-aged
I was
white man.
just hired for Bad Moms 3, so
I mean,
get
nothing
ready.
against even Bad Moms. Like,
It's
I
set
haven't
around
seen
Passover.
That.
It's going to be
sure
very
it's whatever.
touching.
I haven't even seen those movies. I'm sorry. Like, I'm sure they're fine. They're just not for me. Actually, I'm not sure they're fine, and they're not for me.
I haven't seen either of them. I mean, so we made this 2.5 years ago, and so that was December of 2015, and the world is very, very different now. And I have become increasingly aware of the of who a character like Emily could, how she could be perceived and who she could be, and it's something that I've really had to think about for myself, because I mean I was pushing this uphill for, Emily came to be somewhere around 2011, 2012, and then it's like you just work so hard to get it done, and then it's done, and then you're shooting, and then like 3 years later, like the world is exploding, and you're like, am I part of the problem? Like it's so, but now it is what it is, and it's not going to change. And I think that I don't feel like you would have signed on for something that you felt was compromising you in some way. So, I
don't feel that your film compromised
Yeah.
me in any way. I felt, I was happy to be there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think maybe it goes back to, some of what we were saying about the who's the main character, and the characters being split down the middle, in the sense that, especially because she's a therapist, it was hugely important to me that she not just be like a sounding board, that she not just serve the purpose of the, letting Josh get stuff off his chest, which is why he's very interested in her life. He asks her questions about her life. Like, he's very intuitive. He's very curious, and then we go off and we see her life. And I think the character was very much inspired by these characters. I remember asking you to watch Krzysztof Kieslowski movies. He was sort of my hero. And he made these characters. His best films. He's a Polish film. I'm very big in the '90s. Sling Blade, the Three Colors trilogy. Like, if it was when I was in college, it moved me. He had these female characters. His best movies all had female leads, and they were all. I think it was very interesting for me as like a young man to see those movies, because it was very mysterious. Like, these were like these very mysterious women who like ate yogurt in France, and I was like, "What's good? This is very weird and exciting to me," and I wanted her to have that, like, an air of being someone I couldn't quite understand, but who still had this very full life. So I guess, I don't know. So I think it's very different from the approach to Josh. I mean, there's like a little more distance maybe of sort of like I have to close it, but I also relate to her incredibly. I mean, for someone to say I don't make great decisions, and mean it, that's like, I think we can all kind of be in that moment. So what were we talking about? Bad moms?
Chodes. I don't know what is wrong with me, but I've been saying chodes for like 3 weeks. I'm just spinning out and calling people chodes and saying that things are chodes, and it's not right. But I think chode feels to me actually very Y2K.
Yeah, after my time.
But you know what's a bummer about it is that, not about chodes, but and we can all go to sleep, but just to say that if you don't call it out and say these comedies where these funny people they're making light of something are taking us down, and they're messed up, and they're written by the patriarchy, and they're bad. If you don't say it, then they keep being there. But if you say it, then you also disparage the women who are doing those jobs because they made a personal decision to do them. So I don't know how to hold both. That I'm like, all right, I respect those actresses. They're like cool and nice and good for them. But for me, I have suddenly decided that I have much narrower margins, and I just can't break them anymore because it makes me feel really bad about myself. And I don't want to sit up here and like be cruel. But the fact is that at the end of my day when I go to bed and I think about making Aardvark with Brian and Sheila and John and Zach, I feel really good about what I learned. And now when I go into my other projects, I know so much more. And I just don't know that I would have had that opportunity if I made a choice that for me felt less wholesome for who I am. Whatever. Sorry. It hurts. This is hard.
No, that's why we're all here. Yeah, I mean, it's actually funny. The comedy aspect's really funny with this, because I think that this movie's had sort of two lives. Almost exactly a year ago, we were at Tribeca, and they called it a comedy, and now the marketing team now it's a thriller, and I think it actually is a much better thriller that turns out to be funny and hopefully a little touching than it is a comedy where you laugh like 6 times. Because when people come to it, when they hear comedy, and I know that now. I mean, I know that, and I'm sure you've experienced when you're out pitching a comedy, it's like, okay, get to the part where somebody shits themselves. Because it's like, if 4 or 5 people don't shit themselves, then it's not a comedy.
You got to get 4 or 5 shits, otherwise
yeah.
they're just not going to put
oneself.
the butts in the seats.
Yeah. And I knew that wasn't the case here, but I think that the laughs that come here, I mean, I wasn't here, so I hope there were some chuckles. I know it's harder with a small crowd. Sometimes you laugh more, and you have safety in numbers. Maybe it helps. Good. Can I just say that we have another cast member here, Dale Souls, who is Lucille, the bag lady. Thank you for coming. And this is but those kinds of laughs that hopefully come out of that are earned. They take a long time. Like when John says, "When would I have played an old homeless woman?" Like I know. It's like we're getting like 10 minutes. We gotta wait for that.
It is the perfect delivery.
Yeah, but like, so it's a very different kind of thing, but hopefully no less. But hopefully it can be both.
But when would he have played an old homeless woman?
That's the funny thing. And I'm not an especially technical human being, but Eric Lynn, the DP, had this idea that I thought was really brilliant, which we're actually shooting in different lens packages in Josh's world versus Emily's world. Josh's is an anamorphic lens, so things are a little more spread out and they bleed at the edges a little more. So when those lights flash and that sort of thing, you get a little more bokeh and a little more blur and that sort of stuff. And then Emily's world is a spherical lens, and it feels much more like what we're accustomed to seeing when we sit down to watch a movie. And that's like a very small thing that isn't necessarily I'm like right at the cusp of not even understanding it, but the fact that it's there really it still speaks to me. I mean, that still feels like an important decision that we made. And there's also a very strong division between day and night. That Hannah, the fact that we see Hannah in the daylight at the end of the film is, I hope, very significant. We haven't seen her outside of the blackest night to that point. And so Josh's world is much more nocturnal and has a different kind of visual feel. And in fact, I think the first time that we see Emily at night is when Craig shows up. So I really wanted that to be like her world is, and when we think of her office, I really wanted like the windows to be open. I wanted to feel that it was bright, it was sunny, the walls are white, there's bright things in the room, like that she occupies the day, he occupies the night. I mean, there were like, sort of little things like that I think. But as far as storylines, I mean, I think it's still, for something like this, the fun of it is to kind of let it be intuitive and sort of see where they go. Because it, at some point it's like, well, I guess this is going to be kind of weird, so let's just see what happens.
I think I've got to, and again, like I'm in a different place now than I was making the movie. Thanks, it was like 2 years ago. Now I just know more about myself, and I know that I get out of control really quickly. So if there's like a song that I like as myself, and I'm listening to it and imagining, like how my day will go, or somebody that I like, or whatever, that is like the number one thing that has to be cut out. All of the things about me have to be cut out. That's what it is. So someone like Emily, like she wears those like hideous blouses. It's like more blouses, just more of this like these things that like constrict and that take away from me. And I remember like being physically kind of uncomfortable in the clothing, and just being like, yep, this is right, because Emily can hardly get it together. She's probably wearing this stuff because she thinks this is what it looks like. At first I saw the wardrobe and I was like, wait, is what? And then I was like, oh, that's right, it's way off. She should hardly be here. Which is confusing because emotionally she can really be there. But she should be there as a friend, but she doesn't have any friends. It just, nothing works. Nothing comes together. It's a million parallel lines. Nothing touches. And so for me, I would rather have all the things of the person I am supposed to be stepping into, even if it feels uncomfortable, because it feels better for me to feel other, because I have a very strong sense of myself, and it needs to go away.
I also feel like I've changed a lot since we shot the movie. But I'm a really, really sensitive person. So like other people's energies can enter me really easily. And I'm like really considerate and I want to be nice to everybody. So I think like two things that I really need as an actor is like, and as a person, one thing is I need a lot of space as a person. I've begun to learn this about myself as I get older. And when you're on a movie set, there's no space at all. There's like 100 people that when they call action, you have to pretend like they're not there. And you know that all of this equipment that's all up in your grill is like not there, you know. And for me, that's really hard. So I've sort of learned about how to take my space, especially as a woman too, like to ask for it if I need it. And also because I'm such a sensitive person, it takes a bit for me to feel safe. And I think I absolutely do my best work as an actor when I feel more safe. Like if I'm working with a director who's kind of a tyrant or scares me, like I won't try as many interesting choices. I've noticed like, you know, like sometimes when I do improv something, it makes it in the movie, and then I'm like, damn, I should have done that more. I should have. But I felt really safe with Brian, which was so nice. I felt like I could, and you know, maybe because he also is an actor and studied acting, so like, you know, has like an empathy for what we do rather than just kind of treating us like robots. Like that should just have you know, there's a million things that go on a movie set, and sometimes people treat you like you're a machine that has an on and off button, and not like it's a fucking mystical, abstract, elusive thing. Like it is so weird what we do. I don't even understand it. So, yeah, that's what I need, a little bit of space and just to feel safe so that I can like actually play and not just like say memorized lines naturally in a fucking whispery voice and like without moving my face.
It is weird what they do. And it's weird that you got, and I'm continually even just thinking about like, just it's all the stuff, and it's also the time. It's also like we need you right now. And then 4.5 hours later, they're like, okay, we're ready for you. I mean,
you know what else? It was a really calm set.
It
And
was.
Shout out to Susan for being an amazing
Yeah,
producer.
Susan.
'Cause I've done, yeah.
Susan absorbs a lot of that.
If you can tell from the
internally.
serenity over
Yeah.
it.
I'm searching my mind to see if this came up because I feel like it did. I think it came up because we had to. They specifically wanted an edit that had no questionable language whatsoever, and there's very little in the film as it is. But so I think we were. There's like Zach had to do ADR where he's like, "Get out of here, dirt faces" or something. I don't think I've written anything that doesn't have some sort of douchebag who I feel like is the guy that I, you know, was afraid of becoming in 8th grade. I don't know where you went to middle school. It certainly wasn't with me. But if you'll recall, you know, I could have been a douchebag. This is something I've known for my entire life. So I think it is. Maybe I am a douchebag now. I think it is purely projection. Those 3 dudes are in everything I've ever written. Yeah. And how about douchebag number 3? That guy was a brilliant extra because he was not legally allowed to speak, and he did a lot.
I'm gonna have to go back and re-examine that.
Yeah, check out douchebag number 3. He's the one who doesn't speak. He's. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I literally looked at a book where they were like, "Here's the douchebag book," and I was like, "That one," and he turned out to be great.
My God.
Yeah.
What a bummer.
Sadly, there's probably more that I look back on, and I'm like, I look back on honestly. I mean, if speaking personally, it was such a huge experience just in my life to have done it, and the fact that it was really pleasant, by and large, over the 2 weeks or a little more than 2 weeks that we spent doing it. I look back on the whole thing very fondly, and I've watched the film and I still enjoy it. I'll say there was a moment that we talked about earlier that I'll just throw out. that was really interesting to me was there's a scene that I feel like that I staged really poorly. And I won't even say which one. You could decide. But there was a scene that I staged really poorly, and John kind of fixed it. And then because of what he did, the DP was like, "Now do this." And I was like, "Shut up, I'm the director." And then I was like, "No, do what he said." And we did what the DP said. And between the two of them, it completely saved the scene, I think. And that's really sat with me now, because that seems to me like that's the kind of thing that you really have to hang on to, I think, and learn from and go, now I know. Now I know, I understand what they did and why they did it. And next time I can look like a genius and do it the first time. So, yeah.
Oh, I really also like the whole thing. It really was like such a quick boop of an experience, but we were mostly in this house the whole time. Emily's office, we really shot in that house, and we didn't obviously have any trailers or anything. We were just either hanging out in the basement of the house next door or in the playroom that was on the third floor of the house. That was Emily's house. And there was one day where we were in the playroom and John and I got put in there and they had Simon the game. Yeah, the boop beep boop, and then you're doot doot doot. And it was a beautiful day of acting, love-making scenes, and then playing Simon. And I was just like, this is hilarious. I love this job so much. Yeah, it was great. And everyone was truly kind and nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all very... I had just moved to New York from LA and was just wanted to get away from so many LA things. And I felt like it was very dreamy for me to just be doing a movie in New York with real actors I respected and material that mattered. And, I was running away from shitty fucking network procedural stuff that I had to do to pay my bills. So I just remember it feeling, but it all goes by really fast with indie movies. It just goes by so fast, because you don't have that much time or money. And so kind of every time I'm as soon as I'm this is so nice and I'm getting to know everyone, it's just all over. And then, but this is nice because these are mini reunions.
Thank you. I will say, at the time when the movie was being called a dramedy, which I think makes people a little ill to hear. I don't know that people really like that. A friend of mine saw the film and said, she was like, it's not a dramedy, it's a tragic comedy. And I was like, ooh, man, I wish that was a thing in this business, to go, I've written a tragic comedy, because you would not, that would be the end of that conversation. But I think that's what you're describing, because it feels like there's something much grander happening that then kind of gets undercut in a very relatable way. And it's just when you think this one thing is happening, that's when something else comes along. And so I certainly appreciate what you're saying, and thank you for saying it. It's a good question. I think I think that everybody was incredibly true to the script. I don't think there are very few. There's very little improvisation, which I should qualify by saying I tried to provide a lot of space for a certain type of improvisation. It just wasn't saying.
You didn't need to improvise on this one.
Well, no, it was like just say these words and then feel free to improvise all you want. But I think that is a thing. I think that is, to me, that's kind of how I was taught to act, I think. And I think Zach really valued that as well. That it was like, you're not going to, the script is the script, and then you get to do all this other stuff. Just do this too. So I guess at some level there was always the ambition that it would be there. and then I think people discovered a lot of really beautiful things. Cool. Okay. Thank you.